Dune was my number one most anticipated movie going into this year, and boy, it did not disappoint.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air. The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes.
Okay, so Dune is Denis Villeneuve's newest movie, and he has been on a roll lately. I mean, in just the past 6 years, he's made movies like Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, which is absolutely fantastic, and he's carried that momentum right into Dune. And man, this movie is so good. Right off the bat, let's talk about the characters. I mean, one of the best parts about this movie really is the ensemble cast they have and all the characters in this movie. And going into it, I was a little kind of I don't think worried is the right word to say, but I'm not like when I say I'm not the biggest fan of Timothy Chalamet, I'm not saying that he's a bad actor or anything. It's just that in all the stuff I've seen of him, I see certain people like rave about him and talking about, oh, he's this, he's going to be such a great actor, and I'm not saying he's a bad actor at all. But I've just in all the stuff I've seen of him, he's always just been good in it, but I've never really understood the hype. So going into this movie, I was kind of very interested to see what he brings into the role of Paul Atreides. And I have to say, I think he did a really, really good job in this movie playing Paul, to the point where I've really kind of changed my tune on Timothy Chalamet. The fact that because in some of the movies I've seen him in, he's very good. And in this movie, I think he nailed the role. In the beginning, it was very one note, but I mean, that's really more so the direction of the director and the way the script was. But as the movie goes on and just kind of seeing how his character progresses and how Timothy Chalamet acts and everything and ends up portraying Paul, he did a fantastic job in that role. The second standout star for me is Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Lady Jessica. And much like Timothy Chalamet, as the movie progresses and as her character progresses, she does an absolutely fantastic job just playing that character, and just the acting that she brought to the role was amazing. And I'm not going to go through each and every character in this review because I mean this is a big ensemble cast, but what I will say is it's kind of like a little bow to wrap everything up as far as characters go, is this is a very character driven story. That's why this movie works, because as great as the special effects are, as great as the sound mixing is and all that stuff and the direction, I mean this movie looks beautiful. It really does. But before any of that stuff, it is a character-driven story, and the characters are so well written in this movie, and it's hard to do because there's so much content that they're going to have to fill into this movie, and Dune is really hard to adapt, okay? We have seen people, I mean, I haven't seen the original film, but I've heard stories about how it just didn't do the book service. I never saw the 3-episode miniseries either, but I kind of heard certain things about that as well. This movie is very exposition heavy in the beginning. You're going to be getting lots of exposition right away. So if you're tired at all, I don't go and see this movie. If you're tired, or don't think to yourself, oh, I can show up 5 minutes late to this movie. If you're still getting your popcorn or whatever, you're going to walk into the movie and be lost already. This movie, is from the get-go, you're getting the exposition. You're getting the lore of the world right from the get-go. And the characters and just everything in this movie just ties that all together brilliantly. And as a quick side note to talk about another character in this movie, Batista's in this movie playing one of the Harkonnen, and I really like what I'm seeing from Batista lately as an actor. Obviously, we know the success that Dwayne Johnson has had, and John Cena as well is having quite a bit of success as well after their WWE careers. But Batista, man, I think that Batista actually probably has better acting chops than the both of them. I mean, Dwayne Johnson obviously has great charisma, and John Cena, when he's in the right roles, such as like Peacemaker and Suicide Squad, he's good as well. But Batista's really coming into his own, and I can't wait to see more from Batista in the future. To go back to what I was saying before about Dune being very hard to kind of translate into movie form, this movie did do a good job at doing that. And this movie runs at about 2 hours and 35 minutes, and I'm going to tell you right now that a lot of that runtime is, you really do need to be paying attention. This is not necessarily one of those movies where you can really turn your brain off and just go in expecting a lot of CGI fight scene. I mean, this isn't like a Star Wars or a Star Trek where, yeah, there's some information you can see, but at the end of the day, there's cool spaceship battles and there's cool this. Listen, there's cool battles in this movie. I'm not saying that there's not. There's cool action in this movie, and when there is action, it's done very, very well. But this is, I can't stress this enough. This is a very exposition heavy movie, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing at all. I mean, because for me, it worked. I think they did a great job doing it. There's just so much information they have to give you, and it's very like a Cliff Notes version of it. but it really worked. And the story in itself for the entire 2 hours and 35 minutes of this movie. And I will say the movie does feel its runtime. It does feel 2 hours and 35 minutes. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that, some movies that are that long, you sit down and then it's over and you're like, oh wow, really? But no, when this movie's over, you've been sitting down for 2.5 hours, all right? But that's not a bad thing at all. This movie is definitely, it's just an experience. And listen, I saw it in the theater. I don't know if this movie would grant you the same experience if you were sitting at home watching on HBO Max. Because I didn't watch it on HBO Max, so I have no idea. But I don't think it would, because seeing this in the IMAX with everybody else, and just, if you've been to IMAX, the screen is huge, the sound is amazing, and we're going to get to sound design here in a second. But this movie is just, this is what movies are all about. It's just, Dune encapsulates that. You got great character development. You got a really, really cool story going on. And then you surround that with just going to a theater with a bunch of other people, seeing it on the big screen and seeing everything play out. It was just, I really hope they get part 2 made. But now let's talk about the sound design in the movie. Blade Runner 2049 had absolutely great sound design. And that's one movie that unfortunately I was not able to see in the theater. So I've only heard the sound design at my own house. So I can only imagine what that probably sounded like in the theaters. But Dune does not disappoint. The sound design is absolutely amazing. And when Denis Villeneuve came out and basically said that, listen, my movie needs to be experienced in theaters, I totally get it after watching it in an IMAX theater. The sound really is meant for something like that. Hans Zimmer does a score for the movie. I'll say this about the score. I know Hans Zimmer gets a lot of flack sometimes because a lot of times the scores are very similar to one another. They're just a bunch of noises. At the end of the day, I enjoy the bunch of noises that Hans Zimmer makes. The thing with this movie is I don't know if I could ever see myself just like putting on headphones and listening to the score of this movie without having like any imagery or watching any scene from the movie with that score, right? This is very much a score that really goes with just the scenes of the movie, to the point where if you remove the scene and you just listen to the music by itself, I don't think it works. So this isn't going to be like something like some of Hans Zimmer's past work where like an Interstellar, for instance, where you put headphones in and you're like, oh man, this works even without ever seeing the movie. I really feel like the score for this movie really is just, it's for the movie itself, and I don't ever see myself listening to it outside of the movie itself. But other than that, I think it was serviceable. There is definitely, if you're a Hans Zimmer kind of hater, or even like if you're a critic or whatever, he's not really going to do anything in this movie to make you think otherwise. It really is just a bunch of sounds, but it fits with everything that's going on with the movie. If I had to think of any negatives about this movie, I mean, the only thing I could really say is I don't think the last 40 minutes were quite as good as the first hour and 40 minutes. It's not like a bad thing. It's not like the last 40 minutes was terrible or anything. I just feel like I really liked that first hour and 40 because I really liked all the setup of the movie, and I really liked all the tension really being had. And the last 40 minutes is kind of seeing everything, finally come full circle and everything. Like after everything has been set up, everything is finally happening. And it's not that it's done bad or anything. I just think as far as the setup and everything this movie had going for it, they just did it so well that it's almost like I kind of wanted more of that. And it's very frustrating that they don't have part 2 in development right now, because listen, this is part 1. You see it, the title screen, Dune, part 1. All right, it's not on the poster or anything I haven't seen, but in the title scene of the movie, it's part 1. And part 2 is not in development right now. As of right now, it's not in development. Warner Bros. Put this movie out basically wanting to see if this movie makes money before banking on a part 2. Now, there's good news for that. At my theater, I went and saw this at noon, okay? And on a Friday. So people are working around that time and stuff usually. My theater was packed. I looked at the AMC app after I walked out of the theater just because I was wondering. I was like, okay, I wonder what the rest of the day is like. Everything else on the rest of the day was saying almost full. All through the weekend was saying that. A few theaters around me was saying that as well. If this movie can make quite a bit of money opening weekend, which I think it will, and if it can at least get, I think, at least 3 million views on HBO Max, I think part 2 will be guaranteed, because I do think this movie is going to make money. I was worried at first because it's a lot of science fiction movies do not make a lot of money unless they're like Star Wars or Star Trek, right? Even Blade Runner 2049, such a great movie, but it did not do well financially. I do think this movie is going to do well financially. I think people are wanting a really cool new sci-fi movie, and I think a lot of people that were fans of the book and obviously the 1984 movie are going to show up and see this movie. So if you like this movie, I don't think we have anything to be worried about as far as fans go. I do think there's going to be a part 2 made of this movie, just because, I mean, just go on your computer or the app and just look at the Showtime surrounding and look at how many seats are filled. People are going and seeing this movie, and then people are also watching this on HBO Max. I do think in a couple of weeks maybe months at the latest, I do think we're getting an announcement that part 2 is going to be greenlit, and I cannot wait for that. So as you could probably guess, I obviously recommend seeing Dune. If you're not really comfortable going to a theater right now, I get it. Definitely watch it on HBO Max then if you're not comfortable. But listen, if you got an IMAX in your area, even something like a Dolby Theater or anything like that, even if it's like 40 minutes out the way for you, I still think it's worth driving 40 minutes to go see this movie in IMAX. This is an experience, much like earlier in the year. I mean, this movie's much better. Dune is a much better movie than Godzilla vs. Kong. But Godzilla vs. Kong was also a great experience to watch in the theater, okay? And some movies just need to be seen on the big screen. And Dune is one of them, and I do think it'll be better appreciated if you just see it on the big screen. Let me tell you, it's a ride. And it's not a ride in a bad sense. It's not like some like popcorn summer blockbuster that's just turn your brain off and watch. It's a ride that, you know, you got your ups and downs. The story is great. It's got great emotion in the movie. You can tell that so much love was made about this movie from the filmmakers. And man, I really cannot wait to hear the news that part 2 has been greenlit. I definitely recommend seeing Dune. You do not want to miss out on Dune. And if any of you watching have seen Dune, let me know what you guys thought about the movie in the comment section down below. And tomorrow I have my spoiler review of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch dropping, a movie that I think kind of gets hated on and I kind of want to talk about for myself. So Halloween 3 Season of the Witch spoiler review drops tomorrow. Stay around for that one. And once again, to reiterate, go and see Dune. You will not be disappointed.
If anything happens, will you protect Paul?
With my life.
Only together can we stand a chance.